Hello, I'm Angie Austin with Oil and Gas 360, and we are at EnerCom's 2016 Oil and Gas Conference, the 21st year of this conference. And we're joined by Mike Carey, and he is a chief economist with Crédit Agricole, CIB. Hello, Mike.
Welcome to be here.
All right, so let's get into your presentation a little bit today. Which regions will be the primary drivers of a global economic growth in the next decade, in your opinion?
Well, I think in the next decade you can still count on the U.S. to be the leader in terms of growth. We have an economy that's relatively well balanced. We have strong consumers. Right now we're at a relatively low level of unemployment, low interest rates. So I would say that it's pretty well poised to receive foreign investment and continue to grow at an above trend pace. Other regions, I think Europe still seems to be stagnating a bit. And with the impact of the Brexit vote, that's probably going to lead to a slowdown, for example, in the United Kingdom next year. And China, as you know, is in the process of re-equilibrating the sources of growth in their economy, and so they're managing to a slower pace of growth. So while the numerical rate of growth will be stronger than the US, say about 6.5% for China, we think that it's on sort of a slowing trajectory.
All right, so speaking of that slower global growth, what challenge does that present to policymakers?
Well, when we look around the globe and we see the slowdown in growth, it seems to be consistent with also lower interest rates and low inflation. One of the reasons I think behind that is productivity growth. For example, in the United States, productivity growth is barely 0.5% per year over the past 5 years. So when you add in changes in the labor force or population growth, you really get sort of a potential rate of growth of around only 2%, which is a lot slower than it used to be. And that's correlated with low interest rates, and the policy maker challenge will be how they can sort of juice up growth a little bit, given the fact that we've got this kind of low potential, and the fact that normally to try and boost growth, policymakers would say cut interest rates. Interest rates are already at rock bottom levels, so it's much more difficult for them to get that impetus to growth moving.
That is a challenge.
Sorry?
That is a challenge.
It is, indeed.
All right, so Mike, for oil and natural gas, does price drive supply or supply drive price? And how does this affect North American shale producers?
Well, in my view, it's the overall global demand that's going to ultimately drive the price. And as I mentioned, we're kind of in a slower pace of growth, so in that sense it explains some of the weakness that we've seen in oil prices generally. On the supply side, what's really interesting is that we see this shift in terms of the US production and the shale production has become so much more important, almost leading to a driver, so that, for example, when overall global demand picks up and prices rise, to some extent, what goes on in the US is going to decide the cap on price, because that higher price will draw back in producers, increase output here, and so that will limit, I think, the rising impact of overall prices. So for example, if you were to ask me, were we ever going to see a $100 barrel on oil in the next decade, I'd say no.
That's pretty to the point. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that generally you can see, for example, the slowdown in demand for China is going to be important, and you also, of course, will have the move towards other sort of renewable resource type moves as we move forward, and policymakers probably make it more difficult for some oil and gas production to take place.
Are you enjoying the conference?
I love it. I love how people are, excuse the pun, drilling down into the details for these companies that are really providing this really great service in terms of the oil. So I'm really excited about it. I'm a bit of an economist, who likes to follow the oil prices and the activity in that sector.
Yeah.
One of the side effects, of course, has been that we've seen such significant cutbacks in capex and oil drilling, of course, which makes sense given the drop in prices.
Yeah.
People are just in pure cash conservation mode. They just want to, continue to exist.
Right.
And that has had a significant impact in the U.S. in terms of slowing business investment spending, to the point where that's one of the weaker areas for the U.S. moving forward.
Interesting. Well, thank you, Mike.
My pleasure.
Again, Mike Carey, he is with Crédit Agricole, CIB, a chief economist, and I'm Angie Austin with Oil and Gas 360. Thanks for joining us.